Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another FP&A Trends Webinar. And today we are going to talk about myths and misconceptions of two important techniques, two important processes in FP&A, namely rolling forecast and FP&A scenario planning. My name is Larissa Melnichuk. I'm here to facilitate this discussion, and we have a fantastic international panel today as well. Just to remind you that today we have registrations from over 650 finance practitioners from 79 countries around the globe. And the main mission of FP&A webinars, FP&A Trends Webinars, to share with you the latest trends and developments in modern FP&A. Just a quick update of today's agenda. We will look at modern FP&A framework for effective rolling forecast and scenario planning, namely how they connected and what is the best setup in order to have good processes. Then rolling forecast, key factors for success, some practical examples. IQVIA, a case study about scenario planning through uncertainty. And of course, the role of modern technology, how technology can help with both processes. We will have conclusions and recommendations, and at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Now, a quick introduction from our panelists. You see that we have international panel here, so please, if you can switch on your cameras, everyone. Richard, Chris, Nitu, and just quick introductions. So let us start from Nitu. Nitu is a Senior Director of Finance at Thomson Reuters, and she's a member of our London FP&A board, obviously joining us from London today. She's a qualified accountant with over 18 years of experience in different areas of finance, not only FP&A, but of course, a deep expertise in FP&A transformation as she was managing those processes. And she has this practical experience in rolling forecast that she's going to share with us today. Nitu, welcome, and we are happy to have you here.
Thank you, Larissa. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Nitu. Our next speaker, Richard Melia, is a Finance Director, FP&A Corporate Finance at IQVIA. And today, Richard is joining us from New York, US. But actually, he's a double member of our FP&A board chapters because previously Richard worked in London and moved 4 years ago to New York and moving back again very soon. So qualified accountant with over 17 years of experience, previously served as Director Finance responsible for UK and Ireland for IMS Health before relocating to the US with his current role. And current responsibility for entire FP&A process and executive level financial reporting. And today, Richard is going to share with us how his company was managing and continue to manage scenarios through this uncertain time. Richard, you are welcome. Welcome to FP&A Trends Webinar.
Thanks a lot, Larissa, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. The third speaker is joining us from the UK as well, Chris Davenport, who is Finance Director, FP&A Corporate. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so just mistake at the slide. So Chris Davenport is responsible for architecture and Director of transformation in Anaplan. So obviously, this is the mistake. I'm sorry about this. Chris is responsible for business value and strategy direction in company Anaplan. And Chris is doing at the moment a lot of transformation projects and a lot of experience in corporate performance management, obviously, and especially in the area how you can transform the messages for executive directors. Chris is joining us from the UK, as you know, and today is Chris going to share with us information about how technology can change it. Chris, you're welcome.
Hi, thank you, Larissa. Welcome to everybody from Anaplan.
And sorry for this quick confusion. So let us move on. let me very quickly update you on International FP&A Board, my company, and then just a few slides to set the tone. So my panelists can switch off the cameras until we start our presentation. So obviously, I'm a qualified accountant by myself with a lot of experience as a practitioner, but at the moment I'm founder and managing director at FP&A Trends Group, an international FP&A board, 27 chapters, 16 countries, 4 continents, and we're doing a lot of educational events for you. About this webinar, it's a 1-hour webinar. Your participation is welcome. We will have 2 polling questions on the webinar subject, and also it would be an interactive Q&A session at the end. And you can ask questions via the chat box. Presentation is available in handouts, and you will receive the recording in the presentation after the meeting. And please stay with us because we will have the survey at the end of the session. Okay, before we start, I would like to say thank you so much to our sponsor for today, Anaplan, the company that is driving a new age connected planning. Anaplan, thank you so much for your support. Let me start with some definitions before we go to some examples, practical examples and insights. We've had a lot of different discussions and webinars separately on rolling forecast and separately on scenario planning as well. Today, we would like to combine those subjects for the reason that we believe that good FP&A setup, it's definitely a request for the both processes for them to be good. This is example of 5 quarterly rolling forecast process. Very easy one, obviously, with our traditional process, everything is closed at the end of the year. So for example, at the 4th quarter, we forecast only 1 quarter, only several months, yeah. And of course, with rolling forecast, depending on the duration, we roll forward on a number of quarters or months or sometimes weeks and so on so far. And very quick definition for you of scenario management or scenario planning. This is a planning and thinking method that deals with uncertainty because the environment is such that it's very difficult to have only one traditional scenario at the moment. But also, as you visited the previous webinars, you know that we are talking about not only scenario planning, but scenario management. So it's not one-time activity, but this is our thinking. This is our planning method at the moment. So how are they connected? We had a lot of discussion with different FP&A board members, in particular with Chris Davenport. We discussed this, how we can connect all of those different methods of FP&A in one slide. One of the biggest problems that we have in FP&A that we don't understand definitions, and we use those definitions interchangeably. People can say not forecasting but planning, or not planning, budgeting, and some people call forecasting process budgeting process, and so on so far. But obviously it's important for us to understand how different those processes. This is the slide where we give you definitions, but also how those processes are connected with each other. So a forecast is what we think will happen based on historic performance and also some environmental changes as well. Yeah. And obviously, rolling forecast or traditional forecast, it's part of this. It's very important not to mix it with plan or targeting process, and with budgeting, definitely not. A target is what we would like to happen and how to achieve it. What we achieve by producing, by changing our plans. So what we should do in order to produce this. And obviously, scenario planning, it's part of this. And the next one is planning process, or sometimes budgeting as well, or planning and budgeting, how we call it. And this is what we intend to do and what we will achieve in order to achieve our target. And this is the way how we do our risks and opportunities. We put errors there because obviously this is the cycle. It's never-ending cycle. You change your targets and you have to update your plans, but then you see that the plans have to be updated and your forecast should be changed as well. Never-ending process, and obviously the main message of this webinar that if you have a good setup, FP&A setup, then you are good with both processes, even with all of these three processes. But let us start. Let us start from our first presenter, Neetu Agarwal, Senior Director Finance at Thomson Reuters. And presentation, it's about a rolling forecast, key factors for success. Neetu, the stage is yours, and you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. I am so glad to be here. So just alluding to how Larissa explained rolling forecast, if I just start to first give you some snapshot of what are the myths of people think rolling forecast is. Sometimes people think that when they are doing planning, and if I go to my next slide, you will see that I have tried to describe it in a very clear, concise way. Rolling forecast is something very different to how we old finance people have done traditional forecasting. It is quick, dynamic, and the most important thing, it doesn't stand across the financial period. It can go over quarters, it can go over 18 months, which are multiple financial year. But the most important thing, it is based on what's happening currently in the business, the industry we belong to, the political scenario of the country we are based, or the global political scenario, or even like the current situation we all are in of the very dreaded coronavirus. Like, that's what rolling forecast does. It is based on the current scenario rather than the traditional planning process where everything was based on prior trends. What happened in the past, what have we learned from the past, and how do we apply that to our future planning? That is very unlike rolling forecast. It is quick, dynamic, and always looking in the front of what's coming. What that helps us do is allocate our resources appropriately to what is required now rather than what we thought it's required 6 months back. And that is a critical success factor of rolling forecast. And if I may again use the dreaded word of coronavirus, I'm sorry to say that, but it did teach us all a lot. And especially, I'll give you an example of people in finance. What one thing we realized is our old way of traditional forecasting sounds and looked and behaved a bit outdated. All of a sudden, March 2020 taught us loads of lessons which we may have been thinking in the past of how do we do it better, how do we support our businesses better. But came March 2020, we had no other option but to relook at how we do planning. Let me give you an example, like what happened in my scenario or our scenario is, as soon as March struck, we realized that the plan which was put in place, which was a full year plan based on what we have done, what we want to do in the year, became obsolete immediately because there were loads of things we could not do. The business was trending differently for us, for our customers, and for the whole organization and the globe. So we had to repurpose and reiterate our resources, our funds, and have to understand how do we best utilize the resources and the money and the investments we want to do as per the current scenario. And what do we understand of the current scenario right now? To be very honest, March didn't give us much results. Everybody thought it's a small thing and we will get over it in next 3 to 6 months. But that learning experience has been huge. What it has taught us is just relying on traditional forecasting and thinking everything will come to fruition. It's not really the right way to go forward. But it's very easy to say rolling forecast is the way. So I do want to touch point on what are the key success factors, which you will see highlighted in my next slide. But for my personal experience, one of the biggest success factor of changing any processes or any fundamental shaking up how things have been done for a long time is culture and mindset. Like, it has to come from within, and at a grassroots level we have to change how we start thinking about things, whether it's traditional, why we did traditional forecasting, or why we have to go through rolling forecasting. And in my next slide, and I will talk about where we are in this journey, but we do have to change about cultural mindset shift. And I'll go back to my key success factors again, because also along with cultural and mindset shift, the few other things which are important is having a robust system and processes. And my panelist Chris will talk about various things which Anaplan gives and supports during this process for various organizations. But people may have system and processes which enables them to quickly move into rolling forecast, but that is definitely required. And when I talk about driver waste model here on this slide, what I mean by is, because we are not looking at what happened in the past and that's what will derive what will happen in the future, we need to have driver based assumptions based on our forecasting process of where we want to go. What do you think this industry will trend into based on what is available in the market? How is the political scenario of a country going to change? How are trade rules going to change? And loads of other things which drives how we go into forecasting our into our rolling forecast model. Alignment is very, very important, not just within finance, but how we align with our business partner. And again, part of the culture and mindset shift, we have to take the whole business unit together in this journey. Because let's be real, as finance partners, we just don't want to be somebody who's giving out targets and then sitting back and watch. We want to be partners in driving the business success. And unless we start changing our traditional way of doing things, that role becomes harder and harder. So this is a very new concept, and I will be surprised and very excited to hear how many of us are in this journey. But definitely this is the way forward and more discussions are required. So let me show you in my next slide how we are, like, how I think where we are doing. Go saying and discussing rolling forecast and having an aspiration of going into rolling forecast is amazing, but very honestly, it is a long, tedious journey. Even with all the system processes and right intent, it is a hard process. So what currently can be done as per my experience is, we all have done traditional forecasting, and most of us do annual budgeting forecasting process. To create a bridge between getting into a fully rolling forecast method, create a hybrid method in which you do a annual planning cycle where you create annual budgets and give out targets and whatever everybody is used to it forever. We create a monthly forecasting cycle along with it, which looks at what's happening in the future, what's coming in the future, and that derives and gives us the risk and opportunities we want to help our business with. We want to tell them that based on the annual budget, this is your target, but the rolling forecast on a monthly basis gives another idea of, well, we have won a really big contract which wasn't part of the annual budget, which creates opportunities in our numbers. And we didn't foresee coronavirus coming, which sees risks in our business. So all that hybrid method gives us a step to go to next level of rolling forecast. So I'm very interested to hear how all of you will vote in our next polling questions. But over to you, Larissa, and I am excited to hear some of my panelists speak about scenario planning, which can also be part of the hybrid method of how Richard will talk about the examples they have used in their organization. But I am really excited of how everybody to tell us what they are doing and what other questions they may have about rolling forecast. Over to you, Larissa.
Nitu, thank you so much. A great insights about rolling forecast and key success factors. I would like to invite our panelists to switch on the cameras, and we will start very quick discussion before we go to the next presentation. Just from my experience, I know how rolling forecast could be really successful and how it could be an absolute disaster if it's not set up on those principles that you just emphasized here, Nitu. Yeah, I even had situations when people produced rolling forecast when the setup wasn't ready. They took annual budget, divide this by 12 and multiply this by 18. So we even had situations like this. So thank you for emphasizing those key success factors. Richard, what would be your key takeaways from this one and any additions about rolling forecast, please?
Yeah, I think actually it was very interesting to hear the presentation that Nitu has on the implementation of rolling forecasts, and I like the references to where the rolling forecast was supporting with improved resource allocation at obviously a time of significant change within the organisation. And I also think that the summary of the key success factors was important to cover. And I think that highlights the focus areas which particularly resonated with me on some of the challenges that I've seen historically within where we've looked at rolling forecasts, particularly in relation to things like the amount of cultural change that's required to help implement this.
Absolutely, it requires a lot of cultural change as well, Richard. Thank you for this. And Chris, any of your experiences on rolling forecast?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Larissa. I just wanted to say, Nitu, that I really like the fact that you're using your rolling forecast to pull out risks and opportunities. It's really important because it helps you bridge from the rolling forecast into the target setting process, because you use whichever risk or opportunity to help you scenario manage and move forward, right? We see many organizations that are stuck with legacy constraints. So cultural issues, you know, people not understanding what a forecast is, they use their forecast as a budget, etc. These really hamper when you try and move into a rolling forecast. So it is difficult. I like the idea of taking a stepping stone and a hybrid. You just got to be careful you don't get stuck there, right? You got to keep your target in mind in terms of get to a proper rolling forecast, get rid of the hybrid in the long term. Just in terms of the systems, the more disconnected your systems are, the more difficult it becomes to get into that rolling forecast situation, because you've got drivers, you need to collect the driver data, you potentially might have 3 or 4 planning systems that need to connect up. That all hampers and slows everything down, right? So if you've got a platform where everything's in one place, it really gets you into that rolling forecast situation much quicker. And then just wanted to talk about, as you go through that process and you're transforming the process, you will create a lot of stress on your legacy technology. So don't think you can just pick up what you're doing, start rolling forecasting, and it's all just going to work and it's going to be okay. You really do need to look at that layer.
Excellent reminders, Chris. Thank you. Once again, thank you for your commentaries, and me too. Thank you for this great presentation. Now we would like to understand what is the process currently in your organization, our dear participants. I'm launching the first polling question, and you are welcome to start voting as soon as you see this polling question. Yeah, and please, what is the best description of your current forecasting process? Please select one of the following. Is it traditional forecast, which is based on accounting period? Do you already have rolling forecast, which only rolling forecast? Or do you have hybrid forecast where you manage both traditional and rolling, or you don't have forecasting process at all? Please continue to vote. More than 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds, just choose the one that is the best description for you. And I'm closing the poll now. Thank you for voting. I'm sharing a very interesting results. And I would like to ask Richard to comment on this straight away as you see the results. Amazingly, no forecasting process for 6% of the participants, yeah, and traditional one 43, only rolling forecast 12%, and hybrid forecast using both processes around 39. Richard, your quick commentary, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, I think the responses here are probably aligned to sort of what I was thinking in terms of expectations, where there's a higher proportion of traditional forecasting versus rolling, but also, you know, people are certainly trying to move towards a future methodology of rolling forecasts, given the higher percentage here of hybrids. And I think there's probably a few factors that are impacting the ability for people to kind of fully move that rolling forecast scenario, you know, around kind of clearly defining some of the key drivers, the implementation of driver-based forecasting tools, and as you know, some of the talking points from Nitu's presentation, and I mentioned it above, around the cultural shift required to implement a full rolling forecast methodology, including areas such as around incentive planning. But I guess what it does show is that obviously there's opportunity here for the finance teams to sort of help play a key role in taking the business on a journey to fully implement the rolling forecast approach.
Thank you, Richard. And Nitu, any surprises for you here? Just your quick commentary, please.
No, one of the surprises is there is more percentage of people on rolling forecast than I expected, which is a very, very good news because, like Chris mentioned, a lot of organization with a good intent of moving to rolling forecast get stuck in hybrid. I would call myself the same. But I am very pleased that the percentage of rolling forecast is not as low as I expected. So definitely a good thing to see here.
Absolutely. We can see different levels of maturity here, definitely. And thank you for sharing this. Thank you for votings. And thank you for your commentaries. Hiding the results, we are moving on and we are looking at the second process today, namely scenario planning. And we're looking at experience of IQVIA and Richard Melia, Finance Director, FP&A Director. Richard, the stage is yours. You're welcome.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Larissa, and I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the discussion here today. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about scenario planning at IQVIA, which was accelerated as a result of the pandemic, although obviously the topics we're going to cover here can be applied outside of crisis situations, of course. So as a brief introduction to the company, IQVIA is a provider of services to the life sciences industry, and providing services from clinical trial outsourcing through to drug commercialization and launch, and then on to the post-launch marketing and performance tracking and management. So with that context, let's move on to the next slide. So this first chart provides a summary of the fairly traditional way that the corporate finance processes at IQVIA have historically been managed. This starts with a vision and a strategic plan, typically over a 3-year period, with associated longer-term financial projections. The company then runs an annual planning cycle, which combines both a top-down and bottoms-up build of the plan to help define targets and actions required to help achieve that plan, as well as the development of a capital allocation budget to ensure that the investments the company is making, whether through M&A, internal development, or other means of capital allocation such as share buybacks, are driving earnings accretion in line with the longer-term strategic plan. We then also run a monthly forecasting cycle that typically runs until the end of the current calendar year, alongside a view of sales and revenue backlog generation to help inform longer-term projections. Within this process, we have introduced some of the concepts relating to rolling forecasts that Neetu has just walked through, such as assessing periods that align with the business cycle and focusing on key drivers such as workforce capacity, but we do still have some ways to go to fully implement a systematic rolling forecast approach. This forecasting approach also includes an assessment of risks and opportunities, which provides us with an opportunity for reaction and course correction as needed, both in terms of the current year plan and the longer term strategic plan. Through these processes, we are using a variety of financial reporting and analysis tools. I would say that we're certainly not bottom of the pack in terms of leading edge finance applications, but also not sure that we would classify ourselves as best in class. However, I think the key point is that the processes outlined in this finance operating model have not included a formalized process in relation to scenario planning, which would introduce more forward-looking approaches to modeling on top of the existing forecast process. So this is where we have some opportunities for improvement in our finance model. And similar to the experiences that Neetu has just described, COVID-19 provided the catalyst for that, which leads us on to the next chart. So as I expect was the case for all of us, in the early part of 2020, it became apparent that the spread of COVID-19 in China and across other parts of Asia was starting to have an impact on our business, particularly in the areas which we relied on face-to-face interaction for sales, and more importantly, access to patients and hospital sites to manage and run clinical trials on behalf of our clients. It was clear that the more traditional models of managing budgets and the forecasting cycle was not going to be sufficient here in the face of unprecedented uncertainty. So the corporate finance team was part of an executive team to help navigate the company's response, which involved the need to implement more formal scenario planning. The steps that I'm going to talk through here will include reference to the pandemic, but as mentioned earlier, these obviously can apply more broadly. Firstly, we needed to define the key drivers and assess the appropriate time horizons for the different scenarios. This can include internal and external factors, and the time horizon will be specific to the type of business or industry that you're operating in. But in our example, we were looking at drivers such as hospital site accessibility and the pandemic trajectory with a focus on the short term over the next few quarters. Once those key drivers have been determined, you'll need to ensure you have a robust way to model and measure them, in which data and analysis will be critical. In our case, we were able to utilize internal AI-based predictive modeling capabilities within our business operations on areas such as the transition from on-site monitoring to virtual, or what is now often called decentralized trial monitoring, and how that shift impacted areas such as workforce capacity needs and pricing, which of course have a financial impact. Being able to determine the relationships between the drivers is key as you then develop the scenarios in the next step. So as part of the scenario planning development, having clear and concise assumptions on the modeling is key, including operational actions to be taken in each scenario. And in our case, this was important to ensure that each of the business units across our company was clear on the approach and were aligned to the centrally managed assumptions, centrally defined assumptions that would be needed to be applied to their businesses to develop the financial modeling. It is also worth noting, or worth ensuring, that the scenarios include some sensitivity analysis to help determine a range of financial impacts. And then finally, if there is a need to implement actions associated with each scenario as needed, you'll want to have the ability for ongoing performance measurement and a continual review of assessing the impact of new information or changes in market conditions. In our example, this included making adjustments to the length and trajectory of the pandemic, which was obviously panning out negatively compared to our original assumptions, although that was offset partially by the capacity of our workforce to continue with sales and business development activity, which was an improvement versus the original modeling. So with that, let's turn to what we learned and future recommendations. So I think from a learnings perspective, what I would say firstly is that the pandemic has reinforced the reality that uncertainty is everywhere, and we cannot assume the status quo, whichever industry we're operating in. Having the ability to consider and develop scenarios that take into account unexpected events, whether that be from new and disruptive competition into the marketplace, government or legislation changes that impact our operating models, or more extreme and one-off events such as the pandemic. These are all important skill sets for finance practitioners to be ready to support the business in acting on in today's fast-moving environment. In some ways, it can be considered an opportunity to accelerate the transformation in the way that the finance function operates. There's also a need to determine key drivers and assumptions for the modeling. If this is not clear, either to leadership or the business, there is a risk that the benefits of scenario planning are going to be diluted due to the lack of being able to assess the interconnections between drivers and assumptions. In addition, all of this requires the support of strong technology capabilities to help provide real-time modeling to inform decision-making on courses of action. So now that we have been through this process and are starting to formalize this within the finance operating model, some recommendations I would make include the fact that scenario planning has to be more than using the rearview mirror as a guide to the future. This links closely to the point above around having the right supporting models and the supporting tools, I should say, to provide context on key assumptions for modeling. In addition, the ability to assess how different scenarios are impacting the resilience of our company. So, for example, what options do we have to manage liquidity if scenario A or scenario B had happened, such as improving cash flow collection, the ability to access credit, assessment of loan terms, etc., which will all help to drive strength in the balance sheet. We may find that it is the case that we need to undertake some actions right now to mitigate risks in the future by undertaking this scenario modeling. And finally, I would say that the scenario planning will help position FP&A as a key partner in managing risk and creating shareholder value, which is something that I think we would all want to be part of within our respective organizations. So with that, I'll hand back over to the team for some commentary.
Richard, thank you so much. What a story, what an experience your company had over the last year with this scenario planning. Thank you for sharing this with us. Quick commentaries, quick discussion with other panelists. I would like to ask Nitu to comment first, and Chris, you will be the next one. So Nitu, any key takeaways from this session?
No, I am just fascinated and so excited to see how finance did the scenario planning in Richard's organization, and they could help some of the key information they give out to the investors, and their organization is doing so much in this difficult times to drive those changes, and finance could help drive some of the decision making of which plant to go and where to invest and all of those. So I think I am very excited to see more of those examples coming our way as finance professionals of how we help drive business rather than just people giving out some numbers. So really well done, Richard. Really great to hear those stories.
Me too. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yes, so Richard, I love the fact that you are using AI in your baselines. We're seeing a lot of organizations wanting to do this. It works very well when you can drive something without going down into the drivers themselves, or you know, use AI in your drivers. I would say one of the things we are seeing organizations that are more advanced like yours, are they starting to look at putting their supply chain planning process and their sales planning process onto the same platform. And so therefore they can connect directly between the finance models and the models in those parts of the organization. It creates a much quicker throughput, so you can do your scenarios far quicker. And then you create direct linkages in your drivers, so you're both speaking about the same number. And also you connect that all the way up to the target, so there's a direct linkage to the targets. So that's kind of where we're seeing the evolution going. It's obviously very difficult if you don't have that capability to pull all of these other siloed parts onto your own platform as well.
Thank you, Chris. Great commentary. Richard, once again, excellent presentation. Great to see how those two processes are connected with each other from the point of view of key success factors. But let us check, now it's a polling question, let us check what is happening in your world, our dear members. So what is the best description of your current scenario planning process? You're welcome to start voting as soon as you see the question. What is the best description for the scenario planning process in your organization? Select one of the following. Scenarios are run in real time. Scenarios are run in less than 1 day. We can run scenarios, but it's time consuming. We are unable to run scenarios. Please continue to vote, or more than 50% of you voted, just a few seconds, and we are closing the poll. I'm closing it now, and I'm sharing the results with everyone. Interesting results, actually. The majority of you, 67%, say that we can run scenarios, but it's very, very time consuming. And you know, this result is so consistent around the globe. We see all of these results very consistent at different parts, at different meetings. Chris, what would be your commentary on this?
Yeah, this is very similar to what we're seeing as well. Most organizations do run scenarios. It's a necessity where we live. You know, with COVID and with all of the external factors that are hitting organizations, and as the business models are transforming, you need to be able to run scenarios, but they are very time consuming. So what people do is they only take the pieces that are very necessary to get to the scenario. I'm surprised actually at 7% are running them in real time. They've obviously starting to put in good platforms to support them, and I'll touch a bit on that later on in my presentation.
Fantastic, thank you for your commentary. But the good news that 20% of people are able to run scenarios in real time or in less than 1 day. This is a huge improvement comparing to previous 2 years, definitely. And obviously, this uncertain situation, we learned a lot in this. And congratulations to those 7% that definitely know what are the key success factors. I'm closing, I'm hiding the results. And let us look at the presentation of the role of modern technology. We have Chris Davenport here, Business Value and Strategy Director at Anaplan, thought leader in the area of connecting and transforming FP&A processes. Chris, you're welcome.
Thanks, Larissa. So just so if anybody doesn't know who Anaplan is, I'll quickly introduce it. So Anaplan is a company that helps you to transform how you see, plan, and run your business. We aim to give you the confidence to make decisions faster than your competitors. Next slide, please. So what you see in front of you is a typical Porter organization. It's supply chain on the left-hand side, your sales and marketing on the right-hand side, and then your operations and your R&D in the center. You have your executive bridging over the top, and you have all of your support organizations underneath. These are typically where your global business services may sit, and in some organizations this is either outsourced or could be centralized. To stitch all of this together, you need technology platforms. So you get like ERP platforms and you get analytic platforms. And what we're starting to see is that there's a lot of emphasis being put into the planning and analytic platforms to help manage performance in this construct. If we can go to the next one. So what I want to talk you through is what we're seeing happening around rolling forecasts. Organizations are starting to connect their planning models in their supply chain. So taking all of the information and how the supply chain actually plans and connecting that through into their demand planning. That we call a value chain or supply chain management. We're also seeing people planning their sales and their marketing and planning, for instance, which incentive compensation for their salespeople, which segments they're going to go after and how they target, flowing through in what we call sales performance management. These two meet in the center on financial planning, and that's typically an S&OP process or an integrated planning process, but this isn't necessarily finance, this is the business planning. When we're doing a rolling forecast, you want them to be planning out into the future at the same cadence and distance out to what finance is going to be harvesting those drivers. And then that rolls up to the executive. When finance collects that information, if you're on the same platform, when you pull it into your finance model, you want to collect in your finance business partner meetings the risks and opportunities as well. And typically you actually want to put those into the platform, because then that gives the executives the ability to steer the business based on the risks and opportunities that they see. We see this very much being the baseline with the risks and ops, and we see it supporting inside the S&OP process, the decision making. Like in Richard's example, you can also use the non-volatile items with AI and statistical forecasting processes. Can we go to the next slide, please? Once you've actually got all that information, you can start planning out your scenarios. And so what you can do then is select the risks and opportunities you want to use, and you use these to steer the business. And what we're seeing in some organizations, and there's a fantastic example with an automotive, where they actually plan out 3 scenarios, an A, B, and C for this presentation. And they tied to inflection points in their drivers, which is the volumes of sales of certain product lines. They pre-negotiate with the unions what will happen with the workforce. They pre-negotiate with their employees in terms of bonuses, and they also pre-negotiate with their supply chain on those 3 different scenarios and the inflection points. As soon as those inflection points happen, the whole organization will go from scenario A to scenario B or to scenario C, depending on the inflection point. So they can therefore switch over to that pre-negotiated way of running their business much faster than their competitors can. It gives them a massive competitive advantage. They save costs or drive revenue, depending on which way the inflection point is driven. Another example that we see is a large pharma, which is also based in the EU. They're using the rolling forecast up at the C-level and board to do scenario planning during their meetings, where they will change the drivers and change some of the sensitivities in their models on the rolling forecast to work out which scenarios they want to go for. And they'll do that on demand in the meeting and discuss the outputs of the model and then decide where they want to go. And that becomes the new target, which is then pushed down into the organization. Again, this gives the executive the ability to steer the business, which is very important when there's a lot of change and you need the agility to, on a monthly basis, if you want to, be able to steer your business, right? Let's go to the next one. So what you can see by the examples that I've spoken through, and also what you've seen from where Nitu's organization is and where Richard's organization is, you've got different sets of maturities. Based on the polling questions, we can see that a lot of organizations are on the left-hand side of this diagram. They're trying to move to the right-hand side. We see with Nitu's organization, they're slowly moving out of that, and they're probably in the midpoint. Whereas with Richard's organization, they kind of crossed over the Rubicon a bit, and they're on the right, getting into the right-hand side of this diagram. What I wanted to let you know is that it is a journey, it is a transformation. You need to look at the cultural aspects. You need to look at your platform underneath to see how to move, right? And don't underestimate the amount of stakeholder engagement you need to do and how much you need to speak to the people that are using this data, that are making the decisions, to understand what the forecast means, what the budget means, and what targets mean, so that everybody's aligned. Once you start doing that and you've got the technology underneath, you can move from this very periodic and static, siloed, rigid style of forecasting and planning to a much more dynamic and agile process where you're collaborating across functions and collaborating not just across the functions on a horizontal basis, but also in a vertical manner where you're going deeper into your organization on the drivers. And don't forget that as you're moving forward, the new technologies are not only just allowing you to do this, but allowing you to do it better when you start looking at bringing in intelligent planning with AI and using things like statistical forecasts and some of the methods and models that are coming online. And if you get those into your model, you can do this much more efficiently and much more dynamically. So it's like a win-win situation on the other side. At that, I'd like to hand back to you, Larissa.
Chris, what a great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Now I would like our panelists to switch on the cameras and to comment quickly. Nitu, you are the first.
Thank you very much, Chris. I found it very exciting, and it's like a dream come true where I'm sitting with my business partner and I'm able to change my scenario on the go and discuss those with them. So I will wait for my time to come on that. But if your organization is able to help others get to that point quicker, absolutely, I'm sure there are loads on the call who would love to be in touch with you to understand that. But that's like a dream come true for any organization to be able to do real-time scenario planning in the meeting.
Thank you, Nitu. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I think the operational structure part of the discussion resonated very well with me in terms of what I see within our business, and I think the key point there is that being able to ensure some of the interconnectivity on business processes between sales, operations, and the delivery teams. I think that's where the additional value within the business can be unlocked, as you have the ability there to have more of a kind of collaborative enterprise-wide processes and the associated systems to help inform the way finance forecasting is undertaken alongside scenario planning, if that's also part of the business, which ultimately is going to help inform decision making within the business, which is kind of clearly where finance can help support.
Thank you so much, Richard. From my side, Chris, thank you so much for sharing a message about the importance of technology. The worst process that I had for both rolling forecast and scenario planning, when everything is done in Excel, and obviously it takes a lot of time and it's very inefficient. So thank you for reminding this excellent presentation. Thank you for commentaries. With this, I would like just to do a quick conclusion, a quick reminder to all of you. We have already a lot of questions. Please continue to send us your questions. We wouldn't be able to answer all of them, but then we will get back to you through email. So all of your questions will be answered. Just a quick reminder that today we were talking about two processes, namely rolling forecast and scenario planning. Those processes that are moving us away from traditional budgeting and forecasting processes. And this is the slide that a quick reminder how those processes are connected. also with the reminder that plan and budget, this is the opportunity for you to evaluate your risks and opportunities. But please never mix your rolling forecast and forecasting process with planning, budgeting, and targeting, because those processes are different. And this is one of the biggest problems why companies are struggling with the process. Now, I would like to start a very quick Q&A session. Not quick, but we still have 10 minutes for this, so a lot of questions. And let us start from the first one. Nitu, a lot of questions after your presentation, and I would like even to combine some of them. Let me try to do this. So the first one, when you use rolling forecast, what do you use as a comparison in your management account? Is it budget or is it something else? Me too. And the next one, which is part of this, what is recommended frequency for rolling forecast? Or is it more event-based, you would say?
I think to answer the second question first, the frequency depends on the nature of your business, like what kind of the sales cycle your business runs onto. If it's a large organization and a B2B organization, they may go into a longer 6 to 12 months to 18-month cycle. So to see the full impact of the resource or the capital or anything you have spent on that business may require a longer cycle. But on a shorter event-based businesses, they may want to do a 3-month cycle or a 6-month cycle. So I think the frequency definitely will be dependent on what business and industry and what kind of nature of business unit you support. And when we go about comparison, the comparison for rolling forecast can still be prior years, that how am I performing as a business, or how is my business performing versus prior years. But if you are in a hybrid model like us, you could still compare with your annual plan. Like you have a rolling forecast, you can compare it with previous year and you can still compare it with annual plan. But to see growth year on year, the basis of comparison will remain previous year. Over to you, Larissa.
Thank you so much, Nitu. The next question is to you, Richard. And again, I would like to combine two questions. There are a lot of them. Richard, can you share any practical examples on how the forecast prompted rolling forecast, but also scenario planning prompted a change in executive decision making? And also, what is the optimal time frame to provide information both for rolling forecast and scenario planning to management for making decisions?
I think in terms of practical examples, I think for us, clearly the implementation of what we went through with the scenario planning process in the early part of 2020 really helped us with being able to provide the appropriate insight and updates to the investor community around our ability to navigate our way through the pandemic. We were able to provide because we had that more of a forward-looking view, we were able to provide kind of the headlights going forward at a time when I think a lot of other organizations and companies were starting to pull back on providing guidance and insights to the market as to where they saw where the direction of travel for that particular company, given the level of uncertainty. So I think the scenario planning modeling really helped us in being able to work through some of those different scenarios, gave us the confidence of utilizing the data that we had to be able to make the appropriate calls on guidance ranges for external investors. And that we were able then to kind of use that as our frame of reference to continue to work through the obviously very challenging situation that the pandemic presented. Larissa, sorry, your second question was around the optimal timeframes. Can you just clarify what the question was again? There?
What is the optimal time frame to provide insights to the executive leaders?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think probably similar to Nitu's answer. I think part of it really depends on the type of organisation or industry that you're working in. I mean, from our example, it's we typically are providing, you know, updates to our CEO on a monthly basis. But that kind of fits quite closely into the process we have around our forecasting cycle. But I think, you know, clearly there's going to be differences depending on the type of industry or company that you're working in, and how fast moving that particular industry may be in. I realize that's probably a little bit of a cop out of an answer, but I think that the reality is that it really is going to be specific to the type of company and organization you're working in.
Absolutely. In ideal situation, we would like to be at the situation when we play scenarios in real time and doing our rolling forecast on demand and practically continuously when it's needed. Yeah. So it would be ideal situation. Thank you so much, Richard. Chris, a lot of interesting questions as well. I would combine a couple of them. So the question to you: what issues do you see when moving forward with these new modern concepts of rolling forecast setup and scenario planning setup? How to make sure that we are aligning forecast with business performance? This is the first question, yeah? And the second one, how modern technology, in your view, can progress this, and how long will it take to implement this setup? Because people need it today. How long they should wait before they see the results? Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, those are great questions and a little bit difficult. I had to take a minute there to listen to them. I think the first one is aligning to performance, right? The most important thing to do is look at what you need to measure and what you're actually using to run the business right at the top. I'll give you a small example. I won't tell you who the company is because it's embarrassing, but we used to, when I worked in finance, used to produce what we called the Finance Bible. It had like about 2,000 pages. And we used to put little errors in it, but they were like Where's Wally type errors. They were very obvious and nobody noticed for 6 months. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much work you're doing and nobody in the executive is even reading it, right? So what we did is we used that as an example actually with the CEO to go, you know, each page here costs us money to produce. Can we focus on what's important? And so we use that as and it's just a little trick, you know, you can go about it your own way, but work out what's most important to the execs. That's the information you start with, and then design your way down, right? So that's how you align to be able to manage performance. If you do that, so to the second question, how do you go about implementing? Well, once you know what that most important information is, you put that in your executive target setting type model, and you build that out for the executive, so that they can sort of start road testing it, and you still got the whole, what I would call hamsters on wheels underneath that are providing all the data up to that small little prototype that the execs are working on. But as they road test it and they go, I need a bit of this information or that information, you can be very agile. And when it settles down, then you start working your way down, follow the drivers down. Where's this information coming from? And then you start attaching your use cases as you work your way down. When you implement in that method, you use the agile methodology, which is fail fast. So do something, get it wrong, fix it. Do something, get it wrong, fix it. And that's very much an agile methodology is very much a way to implement modern tools on the cloud, because what it allows you to do is, instead of trying to specify everything up front, which is near impossible, you work out as you're working with the business what they need, and then keep correcting the technology as you go, which means you do need to choose technologies that are very easy to reconfigure. You don't want something that you've got to configure it once and sit with it for 7 years, which kind of comes onto that technology side of the platform. You need agile technologies in the platform that can really help you not just be agile as a business, but also be agile in the way you implement.
Thank you so much, Chris. We have time for a very, very quick question to all of you, and your answer like 20 seconds, because the question is, what would be the first step to planning a project on implementing successful rolling forecast and scenario planning? So very quick answer from you, me too. What is the first step?
Mindset change.
Mindset change. It's great. Richard, what would be for you?
Yeah, I would actually agree. I was going to say cultural change. I think you've got to have the buy-in from the organization here to drive this forward. I don't know that finance can kind of drive this by themselves. having engagement with the appropriate parts of the organisation to help, roll that through the business and become really a sort of an agent for changes where finance can play a part, but the culture needs to follow as well.
Absolutely. Great insight. Chris, your first step.
Yeah, so I like to think of, I don't know if anyone's watched Wayne's World, but the Wayne's World analogy of throw the party and they will come. I think the best way to start is to build a small model with a rolling forecast in it and show it to the executive and go, why not? Why can't we run the business this way? It's a small pilot. It's something that you can stop if it doesn't work. But I think that's probably a good place to start, is to show them what it looks like. It's very hard to change people's minds if they can't see it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let me close our Q&A session right now, but I would like to ask our participants to stay just for a few seconds because there are a few announcements. There are more questions, and obviously you can still continue to send them, and we will answer them offline. We will send you emails with the answers. Just a few announcements that we are prepared some interesting webinars for you. And there will be some break over the summertime, but it's about our latest trends and developments from survey that we just finalized, and also the process how we can harmonize top-down and bottom-up planning processes. You can register, and with this, I would like to say thank you so much to our technology partner, Anaplan. Thank you so much for supporting us with this webinar. I would like to say thank you so much to all of you for being part of this project. I would like to say thank you so much to all our members around the globe. Please stay connected and please send to us any interesting insights and case studies that you have. You know how to find us. And finally, I would like to say thank you so much to our fantastic panelists. Thank you for being here with us. Great collaboration, a lot of energy, a lot of experience. Thank you so much for sharing this. Thank you, Nitu, Richard, and Chris. And I hope to see you very soon, face-to-face, at face-to-face meetings.
Thank you. Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.